Okay, so spring is here,
Hmm.
right? The birds are singing, flowers are blooming, and I don't know about you, but my wallet's feeling a little lighter these days.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
I mean, it's like as soon as that weather warms up, I suddenly need new clothes, new outdoor gear, maybe some new plants for the garden, you know,
I think we all get hit with that urge for a little springtime refresh.
a refresh, yeah, and maybe a little retail therapy sprinkled in too.
And maybe more than a little.
But on this episode of The Deep Dive, we're going beyond just acknowledging that spring spending spree.
Yeah, we're going to dig into the why.
We're doing a deep dive into the psychology of springtime shopping to figure out what's really going on in our brains when we hit that add to cart button.
We've got a really interesting mix of research and articles for this one, looking at everything from consumer behavior to how our brains actually react to things like sales and advertising.
It's fascinating stuff. So we'll uncover the psychological tricks that marketers use, the role our own emotions play, and maybe even some strategies to shop a little bit smarter this season.
So yeah, let's get into it.
All right, so let's start with the basics here. Why do we shop in the first place?
Hmm.
I mean, obviously we need things to survive, food, shelter, clothing.
Hmm.
But there's got to be more to it than just pure necessity.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it, right? Have you ever bought something that you didn't strictly need?
Yeah, probably more often than I'd like to admit.
Right, exactly. So beyond those basic needs, psychologists often talk about two main types of shoppers, utilitarian and hedonic.
Utilitarian and hedonic. Okay, break those down for me.
So your utilitarian shopper, they're all about practicality. They're driven by a need. They need new running shoes because their old ones have holes in them. They need
Hmm,
groceries. They're focused on function.
right, makes sense. And what about those hedonic shoppers?
Hedonic shoppers, well, they're all about the experience, the pleasure, the emotional satisfaction of shopping itself.
Oh, so that's like me browsing online for a new dress, even though my closet's already overflowing.
Exactly. They might buy things that make them feel good, express their identity, or simply because it's enjoyable.
So it's not always about needing something. It's about wanting something.
Precisely. And I think most of us probably fall somewhere on that spectrum between utilitarian and hedonic, depending on the situation, you know?
Oh, for sure. Like sometimes I'm super practical just getting the essentials. But other times I'm definitely letting my emotions take the wheel and indulging a bit.
We all do it.
Yeah.
And it's those emotions, those feelings that play a huge role in the psychology of shopping.
Okay, so let's talk about those emotions.
Hmm.
What's happening in our brains when we shop? I mean, I know I get a little rush of excitement when I find a good deal or finally buy something I've been wanting.
Yeah, you and everyone else. It's all about dopamine.
Dopamine, the brain's reward chemical.
Exactly. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that plays a key role in our pleasure and reward system. And when we shop, particularly when we find something we like or anticipate buying something, our brains release dopamine.
So that's why just browsing online or adding things to my cart can feel so good.
Exactly. The anticipation, the possibility of getting something new, it triggers that dopamine release and creates a sense of pleasure.
It's almost like the hunt itself is rewarding.
It is. And you know what's even more interesting? Some research suggests that the anticipation, the lead up to a purchase, can actually release more dopamine than the actual purchase itself.
Really, so I'm getting more of a dopamine hit from browsing and adding to my cart than actually receiving the package.
Sometimes, yeah, it's that anticipation that builds up the excitement that really gets the dopamine flowing.
And speaking of excitement, those limited time offers, those flash sales, they always seem to get me.
Oh, yeah, they know what they're doing. Those marketing tactics tap right into our fear of missing out, or FOMO.
FOMO. Yeah, that feeling that if I don't act now, I'm going to miss out on something amazing.
Right, and it creates a sense of urgency pushing us to make quicker decisions.
Like I don't have time to think about it. I just got
Right.
to buy it before it's gone.
And then on top of that, there's the power of social proof.
Social proof. What's that?
It's the idea that we look to others to guide our own behavior. So if we see a bunch of people buying something or raving about a product, we're more likely to think, oh, it must be good. I should get it too.
Oh, yeah, like seeing a huge line outside a new restaurant makes you think it must be worth the wait.
Exactly. Or, think about the hype around new tech gadgets, people camping out in front of stores to be the first to get their hands on the latest phone.
It's like it's not even about the phone itself anymore. It's about being part of that group, that exclusivity.
And that anticipation of that dopamine rush when they finally get that phone.
It's a whole social phenomena wrapped up in a little piece of technology.
Absolutely. So we've got dopamine, FOMO, social proof, All these factors working together to influence our shopping habits.
And now imagine all of that amplified by the arrival of spring.
Ah, yes, springtime
It's
shopping.
like a whole other level of shopping frenzy.
Well, springtime is so strongly associated with renewal, fresh starts, new beginnings. It's like a collective reset button.
Yeah, and after a long winter, everybody's ready to shake things up a bit.
Right. And that feeling, that urge to refresh and renew it, translates directly into our shopping habits.
I'm not just imagining it. There's actually something about spring that makes me want to buy more stuff.
Not just imagine it at all. There's a real psychological and even physiological shift that happens when spring rolls around.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, first of all, think about the weather. Longer days, more sunshine, warmer temperatures. All of that leads to increased serotonin levels in our brains.
Serotonin, the happy chemical.
Exactly. And when our serotonin levels are up, we tend to feel happier, more optimistic, more energetic.
And maybe more likely to spend money?
It's definitely possible. That positive mood that comes with spring can make us feel more open to treating ourselves or indulging in a little retail therapy.
And then there's the whole spring cleaning phenomenon.
Yeah, yes, spring cleaning. As we declutter our homes, get rid of old stuff, it naturally creates a void that we want to fill.
So it's like I get rid of a bunch of clothes and suddenly I need to go shopping for new ones?
Right, or you reorganize your kitchen and realize you need new storage containers or maybe some new decor to brighten things up.
And it's not just about replacing what we've gotten rid of. It's also about wanting to reflect that fresh springtime vibe in our homes and in ourselves.
Exactly. We want our surroundings to match that feeling of renewal, and that often involves buying new things.
And let's not forget about the practical changes that come with spring.
Right, like our wardrobes completely change.
Out with the heavy coats and boots, in with the shorts and sandals.
And maybe a new swimsuit for those upcoming beach trips.
Exactly. And then there's the shift in activities. Maybe we're spending more time outdoors, hiking, biking, going to the park.
So we need new gear, new clothes to support that more active lifestyle.
Right. And the fitness industry knows this. They're always launching their spring and summer campaigns right around now.
Oh, absolutely. They're tapping into that desire to get in shape, to feel our best as the weather warms up.
And that often translates into buying new workout clothes, new shoes, maybe even new equipment.
They're brilliant at capitalizing on that springtime motivation.
So we've got this perfect storm of psychological and physiological factors converging in the spring that make us extra susceptible to those shopping urges.
It's a marketer's dream, really.
Okay, so let's talk about something we hear a lot about retail therapy. I mean, we've all been there, right? A bad day, a stressful week, and suddenly a little online shopping spree seems like the perfect solution.
Oh, yeah. Retail therapy. It's a thing for sure.
But is there any real psychological basis for that, or is it just a way to justify overspending?
No, there actually is some legitimate psychology at play here.
Really? Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So for some people, shopping can actually serve as a coping mechanism for stress and anxiety.
It's like a way to feel a little bit better, even if it's just temporary.
Exactly. It can provide a sense of control, especially when other areas of life feel chaotic or overwhelming.
Like, I can't control this crazy work project, but I can control what I buy.
Right. And the act of making a purchase, even a small one, can give us a sense of agency, of decision-making power.
It's like I'm taking charge of something, even if it's just choosing a new pair of shoes.
And then there's the instant gratification factor.
Ah, yes, the instant mood boost of getting a new thing.
Exactly. It's a quick and easy way to alleviate those negative feelings, at least for a little while.
And sometimes those purchases can also reinforce our sense of identity or help us express ourselves.
Absolutely. Like buying clothes that make us feel confident or books that reflect our interests. It can be a form of self-care in a way.
But of course, there's a dark side to retail therapy, right?
Oh, absolutely. If we're not careful, it can easily turn into emotional spending and impulsive purchases.
Which can lead to a whole lot of guilt and financial stress down the road.
Right. And the happiness we get from those purchases is often very fleeting. So we end up needing to buy more and more to achieve that same feeling.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And for some people, it can even develop into a full-blown addiction.
Yeah, shopping addiction is a real thing. And it can have serious consequences for people's lives.
So while a little retail therapy here and there might be okay, it's important to be mindful of our motivations and to make sure we're not using shopping as a way to avoid dealing with deeper issues.
Couldn't agree more. It's all about balance and awareness.
Okay, so we've talked about dopamine, we've talked about FOMO. What other psychological factors are at play here that drive us to buy things?
Well, there's something called the newness effect.
The newness effect. Okay, what's that?
It's basically our brain's natural tendency to be drawn to novelty, to new things.
Like shiny object syndrome.
Kinda, yeah. New things capture our attention, they spark our interest, they make us feel excited, and that excitement drives us to want to possess those new things.
So it's not just about wanting a new phone, it's about wanting the newest phone, the one that just came out.
Exactly. It's that novelty that really drives the desire.
And then there's the scarcity effect, right?
Oh, the scarcity effect, that's a big one.
Tell me about it.
Well, the scarcity effect is the idea that when something is perceived as being rare or in limited supply, it becomes more desirable.
Like those limited edition sneakers that sell out in minutes.
Exactly. Brands like Supreme, they've built their entire business model around scarcity.
So it's not just about the product itself. It's about that feeling of exclusivity, of having something that not everyone else can get.
Right, and that perceived scarcity drives up demand and
Right.
prices.
It's like a psychological game that we all play.
And then, of course, there's social comparison.
Ah, yes, keeping up with the Joneses.
Exactly. We constantly compare ourselves to others, our friends, our neighbors, people we see on social media. And that comparison can fuel a desire to buy things that will help us fit in or achieve a certain status.
Like if all my friends have the latest gadget, I might feel pressure to get it too, even if I don't really need it.
Right? And that social pressure can be a powerful motivator when it comes to spending money.
Especially in today's social media-driven world where we're constantly bombarded with images of what everyone else is buying and doing.
It's hard to escape that feeling of, I need to keep up.
It really is. So
Yeah.
we've got this whole web of psychological factors at play. Dopamine, FOMO, social proof, newness, scarcity, social comparison. It's a lot to navigate.
It is. And for some people, those urges to shop can become so overwhelming that it crosses the line into addiction.
Yeah, let's talk about shopping addiction.
Yeah.
What are the signs that someone might be struggling with this?
Well, it's often called compulsive shopping disorder or buying disorder. And it's characterized by this persistent, uncontrollable urge to buy things.
Even when they don't need them or can't afford them.
Exactly. It's like the urge becomes so strong that it overrides any rational decision making.
And it can have serious consequences, right?
Absolutely. It can lead to financial problems, relationship problems, and even emotional distress.
So what are some of the red flags, the signs that someone might need help?
Well, one is frequently buying things they don't need or can't afford. So like buying duplicates of things they already have or maxing out credit cards.
Right. And it often goes beyond just the purchase itself, right?
Yeah, people with shopping addiction often experience intense feelings of guilt or shame after shopping sprees.
But they keep doing it anyway.
Exactly. They might even try to hide their purchases from loved ones because they're embarrassed or afraid of judgment.
And they might spend an excessive amount of time shopping or thinking about shopping even when they're not actually buying anything.
Right. It becomes like this preoccupation, this obsession that takes over their thoughts and actions.
And what are some of the underlying factors that might contribute to shopping addiction?
Well, as we talked about earlier, dopamine plays a big role.
That reward chemical.
Right. For some people, that dopamine rush from shopping becomes so addictive that they need to keep buying more and more to get that same feeling.
It's like a drug.
In a way, yeah. And then there are also psychological factors like trying to fill emotional voids with material possessions.
Like if someone's feeling lonely or insecure, they might try to boost their mood by buying things.
Exactly. And then there's the influence of our consumerist culture, the constant messaging that tells us we need to buy more to be happy or successful.
It's everywhere you look, especially on social media.
Right. And those messages can be really powerful, especially for people who are already vulnerable to addiction.
So it's a complex issue with multiple contributing factors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. If you or someone you know is struggling with shopping addiction, it's important to seek professional help.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about impulse buying.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there, right? You go to the store for one thing and end up walking out with a whole bag of unplanned purchases.
Oh, yeah, those end cap displays get me every time.
They're strategically placed for a reason.
Right. Retailers know exactly what they're doing.
So what's the psychology behind impulse buying? What makes us so susceptible to those spur-of-the-moment decisions?
Well, it's all about emotion. It's about that immediate gratification, that feeling of, I want it now.
And retailers use all sorts of tricks to tap into that desire.
Oh, yeah, they're masters of manipulation.
Like those flash sales with the countdown timers.
Right. Creating that sense of urgency that if you don't act now, you'll miss out.
And then there's the strategic placement of items.
Like putting those little tempting treats right by the checkout.
When your willpower is already depleted from a long shopping trip.
Exactly. They know we're more likely to cave in at that point.
And then there's our own emotional state, right? If we're stressed or bored or even overly excited, we're more prone to impulsive decisions.
Absolutely. Our emotions can definitely cloud our judgment and make us more susceptible to those marketing tactics.
So how can we resist those impulse buys? Any tips?
Well, one strategy is the 24-hour rule.
Okay, tell me about that.
It's simple. If you see something you want but don't need wait 24 hours before buying it.
So give yourself some time to cool off and really think about it.
Exactly. Often that initial urge will pass and you'll realize you didn't really need it after all.
And if you're still thinking about it after 24 hours, then maybe it's okay to indulge.
Right. But that pause, that moment of reflection can save you a lot of money and regret.
Another good tip is setting a budget before you go shopping.
Absolutely. That way you know exactly how much you can spend and you're less likely to overspend.
And stick to a shopping list.
Right. Don't deviate from the list, no matter how tempting those impulse buys might be.
And maybe avoid shopping when you're feeling particularly emotional.
Yeah, if you're stressed or upset, maybe it's not the best time to hit the mall.
Because you're more likely to make those rash decisions.
Exactly. And even just being aware of those impulse buying triggers can be helpful.
Like knowing that I'm more likely to buy junk food when I'm hungry.
Right. Or that you're more likely to buy clothes when you're feeling down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just being conscious of those patterns can help us make more intentional choices.
So awareness is key.
Okay, so on the other end of the spectrum, we have shopping anxiety.
Shopping anxiety. Yeah, that's a real thing too.
I mean, for some people, shopping is a fun and enjoyable experience, but for others, it can be incredibly stressful.
It's like a nightmare for them.
So what causes shopping anxiety? What are people so anxious about?
Well, it can be a combination of factors. For some people, it's financial worries. They're stressed about overspending or not being able to afford what they want.
Makes sense. And then there's decision fatigue.
Right. Oh, decision fatigue. That's a
Yeah.
big one, especially with so many choices available these days.
It's like our brains get overwhelmed trying to process all the options.
It's exactly. And that can lead to anxiety, stress, even paralysis.
Like, I just can't make a decision, so I end up not buying anything at all.
It happens. And then there's the fear of buyer's remorse.
Ah, yeah, that sinking feeling that you made the wrong choice.
Right. And that fear can be so strong that it prevents people from buying anything at all.
So what are some specific shopping situations that might trigger anxiety for people?
Well, for some people, it's simply the overwhelming nature of retail environments.
Like walking into a huge department store with thousands of products?
Right. It's sensory overload. It's too much to process.
And then there's a pressure of feeling like you need to buy something.
Like those salespeople who are always hovering around asking if you need help.
It can feel really suffocating.
And then for some people, it's the social aspect of shopping.
Like worrying about what other people will think of their choices.
Right. Or feeling self-conscious about their body or their budget.
It's like all those insecurities get amplified in a shopping environment.
And you know what's interesting? While online shopping might seem like a less anxiety-inducing option, it actually comes with its own set of stressors.
Really? Like what?
Well, there's the worry about online scams.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
And then there's the hassle of returns if something doesn't fit or isn't as expected.
And the potential for shipping delays or lost packages.
Right. So even though online shopping can eliminate some of the social pressures, it also introduces new anxieties.
It's like a trade-off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, shopping anxiety is a real thing and it affects a lot of people.
Okay, so let's get inside our brains for a minute and talk about what's actually happening neurologically when we shop.
All right, let's take a brain tour.
So we know dopamine is involved, but what other brain regions are at play?
Well, first of all, remember that anticipation we talked about earlier, the excitement of potentially buying something new?
Yeah, that dopamine rush.
Well, that dopamine is released in the reward centers of our brains, specifically the nucleus accumbens.
The nucleus accumbens, okay.
Yeah. And then there's the amygdala, our brain's emotional processing center.
What's the amygdala doing when we shop?
Well, the amygdala is particularly active when we see a good deal, a price drop.
It's like our brain is saying, hey, this is a good opportunity, don't miss out.
Exactly. And that feeling of excitement of getting a bargain that's driven by the amygdala.
And then there's the prefrontal cortex.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. The prefrontal cortex, the executive function center of our brains.
The part that helps us make rational decisions.
Exactly. And the prefrontal cortex is hard at work when we're trying to weigh our options, compare. Prices make choices.
But as we've talked about, that can lead to decision fatigue.
Right. When we're bombarded with too many choices, the prefrontal cortex gets overloaded.
And that's when we start feeling stressed, anxious, and indecisive.
Exactly. And that's when those impulse buys become even more tempting.
Because our brains are just looking for a way to shut down that decision-making process.
And you know what's really fascinating? There's an entire field of study dedicated to understanding how our brains respond to marketing.
You're talking about neuromarketing.
Exactly. Neuromarketing uses techniques like brain imaging and physiological measurements to study how consumers react to different marketing stimuli.
So like tracking brain activity while someone's watching a commercial.
Right. Or measuring their heart rate and skin conductance to see how they respond to different products or store layouts.
It's like they're trying to hack into our subconscious.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
And they use that information to create marketing strategies that are even more effective at influencing our behavior.
That's kind of scary.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah.
But it also shows just how powerful those subconscious influences are.
So knowing all this, how can we become more mindful and smarter shoppers?
Well, the first step is awareness, right? Just understanding these psychological and neurological factors at play can help us make more conscious choices.
So being aware of those dopamine triggers the FOMO, the social comparisons,
Exactly. And then we can start to develop strategies to counteract those influences.
like setting budgets, making shopping lists, and avoiding shopping when we're emotional.
Right. And being mindful of those impulse buying traps, those end cap displays, those limited time offers.
And maybe even unfollowing those social media accounts that are constantly tempting us with new things.
That's a good one. And ultimately, it's about shifting our focus from instant gratification to long-term satisfaction.
So instead of buying something just because it makes us feel good in the moment, we can ask ourselves, is this something I truly need? Will this bring me lasting joy?
Right. It's about being more intentional with our purchases.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the psychological and neurological factors that drive our shopping habits, the specific ways that spring amplifies those urges, the pros and cons of retail therapy, the dangers of shopping addiction, the psychology of impulse buying, the stress of shopping anxiety, and even the inner workings of our brains when we're browsing and buying.
It's been a whirlwind tour of the shopping mind.
It really has. And I hope this deep dive has given you, our listener, a new perspective on your own shopping habits.
And some tools to navigate the marketplace more mindfully.
Exactly. So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Think about the last purchase you made. What psychological factors were at play? Did you fall prey to FOMO? Were you influenced by social comparison? Or were you simply fulfilling a genuine need?
Pay attention to those thoughts, those feelings, those motivations, and see if you can start to identify the patterns in your own shopping behavior.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand the forces that influence our choices, the more control we have over our spending and our overall well-being.
Happy shopping, everyone.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the psychology of springtime shopping.
Until next time.
Bye.